So hello, welcome to the video and welcome back to the Celebrity Silhouette. I'm in Southampton, about to board the Silhouette for a 7-night cruise up to Norway. We have 2 sea days ahead of us as we cross the North Sea up and back, with 4 port stops in Norway as the reward, plus all of the fun the ship's 15 bars and 11 restaurants offer. In this video I'll review the cruise and I'll also give my observations on how the lingering effects of the you-know-what continue to influence the cruise experience, on cruises leaving the UK at least. So if that sounds good, stick around! Hi, I'm Matt and I love cruising. I love the ships, the places you visit, the entertainment, and every now and again I'll also enjoy a drink. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next cruise. I originally wanted to talk about the you-know-what at the end of the video, as its impact on the cruise experience has greatly diminished since I last cruised from the UK last year. Indeed, there were some decent periods of time where the cruise experience was virtually normal. But some of the lasting impacts are felt right at the start of the cruise, so I'll get the subject out of the way now. When cruising restarted, you were required to pick an arrival window at the terminal. This was designed to space out arrivals and limit congestion in the terminal, and it was still a requirement for our sailing. But it was not enforced in any way, and arrival times seemed to be widely ignored. We picked the earliest possible slot, but hundreds of other people arrived at the same time, far more than the app would have allowed. We were also asked to wear face masks in the terminal, and this was also widely ignored. When most of the staff aren't masked up, that communicates a relaxed attitude towards the requirement. To board, you needed to show proof of vaccination and either a recent negative test or a recovery certificate. The NHS app will automatically produce a recovery certificate if you test positive via an NHS-administered PCR test. But when I recently tested positive at home, I was still able to get a PCR test through the NHS. That gave me a recovery certificate in the NHS app, which Celebrity accepted and spared me the need to take another test. A recovery certificate is quite a handy thing to have. You can pay for a private recovery certificate, but these are expensive and I have no idea whether they are accepted as readily as the NHS version. The pandemic also led to what is known as Safety Briefing 2.0, where you watch safety videos via the app or in your cabin, then visit the muster station at your leisure. This was still in force for our cruise and is a much better way of completing the safety requirements than the old way. Long may it continue. I'll make a couple more points about the you-know-what as we go. So, to the cruise. There were just over 2,400 passengers aboard, which was around 85% of the ship's capacity. We learned that this was the second fullest Celebrity cruise since the restart, the fullest having also been the Silhouette the week before. Having enjoyed 4 cruises last year with significantly reduced passenger counts, it was almost a shock to see so many people aboard, but it brought life back to the ship, even if there was some competition for seats in popular venues. This was amplified as it was a cold weather cruise. On warm weather cruises, evening events are scheduled for the pool deck, but as it was close to freezing outside, all events were indoors, which added further pressure to the inside capacity. A little annoying at times, but it is great that the industry is returning to normal so quickly. No masks were required on board, although perhaps 10% of passengers chose to still wear them, which was a personal choice that is to be respected. I did experience a couple of occasions where masked passengers objected to me joining them in the lift unmasked. Last year, those objections would have been legitimate, but as we returned to normal, I actually took their objections as a bit of an insult, as I was doing nothing wrong. But it only really happened at the start of the cruise, and I sensed that people relaxed into things as it went on. Crew members are still required to wear masks except when performing. This is increasingly incongruous given the lack of restrictions on passengers, and I believe there's no date set for this requirement to end. This is tough on the crew and does impact on the intimacy of interactions with them, although after a year they are pretty much used to it and they are now allowed off the ship in ports, which is a welcome development. With the passenger load at 85%, the crew count was around 1150, which is around 80% of normal levels. That 20% shortfall equates to around 300 staff, so there was a bit of a service deficit. This was quite noticeable on the first couple of days of the cruise, and wait times for service were sometimes significant. Some of the crew were openly complaining about the situation in quite an unprofessional manner. One senior member of the restaurant team complained that as so many guest cabins had been sold, there weren't enough free cabins for new crew to use for their quarantine period. That left the existing crew to carry the load. I don't know whether this was true, but another complaint we heard, that a chunk of the Silhouette team had been poached to staff the newly launched Celebrity Beyond, was categorically denied by another, more senior officer, who should know. It was all a bit unprofessional from the crew, and it suggested that the team's morale may not be brilliant. But the crew really got into the swing of it by day 3. I think some responsibilities had been redistributed, and perhaps a few spot promotions had also been given. The drinks waiter, who didn't know how to open my beer bottle, gave a strong vibe of having been working in the laundry the shift before. And overall, after a few bumps on days 1 and 2, you really couldn't detect any understaffing. And as is usual with Celebrity, the team was wonderful, friendly and helpful, and we had some memorable interactions.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the Silhouette!
So the ports. With apologies to Reed and any other Norwegian viewers, I'm now going to butcher some Norwegian place names. You hear Joanna Lumley advertise the Hurtigruten, and you think you can speak Norwegian. First stop was Haugesund. I'd planned to go ashore in the afternoon, but at lunch I overheard someone say their expectations were low when they got off and they came back disappointed. So I downscaled my plans and only went for a short stroll, which still yielded some attractive vistas of the town. A pleasant enough place. Next was Olden, where we had a couple of problems. Firstly, we didn't actually go to Olden. We dropped anchor next to a small hamlet called Loen and were told that there were very few taxis available and that the bus that went to Olden was actually part of a tour. So basically, we're not in Olden and it's almost impossible to get there. Which was a little strange, and I never really heard a good explanation as to why we weren't able to go to the port we were scheduled to visit. We had booked an excursion for the afternoon, a trip to the Kendal Glacier. The second problem we had is that the tour didn't go well. I'll spare you the full details, but the guide had no idea of what tour he was supposed to deliver, and without me having a lengthy argument with him, we would not have actually visited the glacier we were supposed to be seeing. My mother was so exhausted with what went on that she actually didn't get to see it in the end. Another issue arose, which wasn't particularly funny at the time, but is hilarious now. The guide confused the tour number, which was 30, with the number of guests he was escorting, which was 28. So we wasted 15 minutes as he and the driver frantically tried to find the 2 guests they thought they'd lost. You couldn't make it up. Next stop was Molde, the furthest point north on the trip, further north than the Faroes and even further north than Anchorage in Alaska, although not quite as far north as Iceland. An interesting nugget of trivia is that prior to his time at the helm of Man United, Molde was the home of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. It was actually a really pleasant town to wander around. The locals were taking as many pictures of the ship as we were of the town. A stop in a smallish place like Molde really emphasises how big the ship is and how significantly it impacts on the small towns it visits. In the afternoon we went on another excursion, first to Bud, not the home of the beer, but a small and picturesque coastal village with some interesting fortifications. From there we continued to the Atlantic Road, which is an extremely scenic stretch of road with some interesting bridges and amazing vistas. The weather was really behaving. I can imagine this is a brutal place to be when the wind is blowing. The final port was Bergen, Norway's second largest city and a place I'd spent some time previously. We took another excursion here, Firstly, to an extremely disappointing reproduction church which absolutely reeked of creosote and you weren't allowed to actually go into. And then to Edvard Grieg's home. This was actually really interesting to visit, built in an amazing location with nature all around. Norwegians really are spoiled to have so much of this sort of landscape available to them. Grieg and Mrs. Grieg are buried on the property, in this secluded location with amazing views. Not a bad place to spend eternity. I'd stay on the bus for the church, but Grieg's gaff is well worth a visit. The tour finished with a guided drive around the city. So these 4 ports were sandwiched between 2 days crossing the North Sea, which was actually surprisingly calm, but which offered little of interest except for the occasional oil rig. So the onboard experience. The food, the bars and the entertainment were all extremely good, as you'd expect from a premium brand like Celebrity. But having cruised on the Silhouette just 9 months earlier, I did detect a little bit of cost saving. Perhaps you'd describe it as cost optimisation. The menus on the 2 chic nights of the cruise were as strong as we remembered, although I sensed that portion sizes were a little reduced. This was my beef Wellington, and although I didn't video the serving on the last cruise, I am certain that this was quite a lot smaller. Away from the chic nights, I felt that the portions had been similarly shrunk. It's the first cruise where on a couple of occasions I felt hungry enough after dinner to need another snack before bed. A quick return to the you-know-what. You still have food served to you in the buffet, which with 2,400 passengers aboard is slowing things down quite significantly. Halfway through the cruise, they made the sauces and condiments self-service, and queuing up just for a glob of brown sauce had been a real pain. I hope this changes soon and passengers can take back control of the tongs. The entertainment was fantastic. I thought the 4 onboard musical groups were targeting a slightly older crowd than last year, which probably reflected the cruise's demographics. There was more classical stuff, more easy listening, and more 60s and 70s music than was perhaps my taste, but people seemed to enjoy it. In the theatre, alongside 3 excellent production shows from the ship's company, we had 4 guest entertainers. Dave Christian, the comedian, who was really funny with an understated delivery style, a magician who I won't name as they weren't very good, and Yariv Zarif, an American singer who could speak 6 languages fluently and claims to be able to converse in 32 languages in total. He'd flown in overnight from New York as an emergency substitute after an injury to a performer in the show that was planned. Frankly, it was all a bit odd, and his polyglot act was a little odd too. But I have to credit Celebrity for reacting really quickly to an unplanned event to still be able to offer us a high quality show. But the undisputed highlight of the entertainment was the Shamrock Tenors, a 4-man group when they boarded, although a 3-man group when they performed, as one member ended up in isolation. An excellent act which the crowd adored. Overall, great entertainment, but I wouldn't be shocked to learn that the total cost of the entertainment was 10 or perhaps 20% cheaper than the entertainers we'd enjoyed last year. I can't blame Celebrity for any of this cost shaving, as they've had a traumatic 2 years and need to get their house in order financially in order to be able to go forward. And I only really sensed a reduction in the quality of the offering as I'd cruised with them so recently. And going back to the staffing levels, having been a finance director myself, I don't imagine Celebrity's FD was crying himself to sleep from being 20% understaffed, as that saves them 20% of the payroll cost. In fact, he's probably sleeping pretty well, as the service levels remain so high, even with a 20% shortfall in headcount. So a great cruise. Probably not the very best I've ever been on, but a very enjoyable experience that was tantalisingly close to normal. Celebrity retains the title of my favourite cruise line. I enjoyed Norway. It's a beautiful and spectacular country that everyone needs to visit. but the experience confirmed to me that I much prefer warm weather cruising, so I'm not sure I'll be rushing to go back to the fjords, on a cruise at least. We did enjoy some pool time in the solarium, but not really being able to enjoy the outdoor facilities of the ship was a big drawback, as it required the indoor facilities to accommodate far more people than they were probably designed to take. So thanks for watching. Look out for my review of my cabin. I took an inside cabin on this occasion, and I have some opinions to share on whether that is a smart decision on a cruise like this. Please like this video and leave me a comment. Have you been to the Norwegian Fjords? Would you consider it? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, please check out my Patreon page, the link to which will be in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.